There is a truth about life that society often hides from the aging empath. It is a false narrative quietly reinforced by a culture fixated on youth, speed, and surface-level productivity. You are told that reaching 60 means decline. You are told that you are moving into obscurity, that your importance is diminishing, and that the most you can expect is a calm but unnoticed existence. However, if you are an empath, if you are among the rare individuals who have spent their life tuned into the emotional states of others, then 60 does not represent a fall. It represents a revelation. Carl Jung understood this. He observed that the life of a sensitive individual unfolds in two clear phases, divided by a psychological midpoint that most people never consciously pass. For the first 6 decades of your life, you existed largely in service to others. This was not a deliberate decision, it was a biological reality. Your nervous system developed without the emotional filters most people rely on. When you entered a space, you did not simply notice objects or expressions. You sensed unspoken conflicts, buried sorrow, and unresolved tensions lingering in the atmosphere. You functioned like an absorber. You took in the emotional weight of your family, the pressure of your professional environment, and the shared anxiety of the wider world, processing it internally. You believed this responsibility defined goodness. You assumed that being kind meant carrying emotional burdens that others were unwilling or unable to hold themselves. As a result, you likely spent many years deeply depleted, experiencing a profound exhaustion that rest could not resolve because it was not physical tiredness. It was emotional and spiritual depletion. You were the healer deteriorating while helping others recover. You were the attentive listener with no one offering the same presence in return. Your identity formed around being the understanding one, the forgiving one, the person who remained when others withdrew. While this made you essential to many people, it came at a significant personal cost. You observed individuals around you who were self-centered or unaware, people who moved through life taking what they wanted without reflection, and part of you felt envy. You questioned why you could not be more emotionally guarded. You wondered whether your sensitivity was a flaw, an abnormal trait that left you unprepared for a demanding and unforgiving world. But now, as you approach or cross the age of 60, a shift begins to occur. If you quiet cultural expectations and attune yourself to your own internal rhythm, you will sense that the dynamics are changing. Jung referred to this process as enantiodromia, the natural tendency of life to move toward its opposite. The intense self-sacrifice of your younger years is now preparing to shift into a deep and meaningful sense of self-ownership. After the age of 60, the biology of the empath goes through a transformation that is as complete as a caterpillar breaking down to become a butterfly, yet more forceful and more decisive. For the first time, saying no begins to feel easier than saying yes. Your tolerance for inauthentic behavior is noticeably declining. In your 30s and 40s, you endured long dinners, exhausting conversations, and empty family obligations because you feared separation. You believed that if you stopped playing the caretaker, you would be left behind. But at 60, a different inner pattern takes control. Jung referred to this as the synex or the crone, not as an insult, but in the ancient sense of the wise figure. This archetype does not fear abandonment because it has finally found companionship within itself. You are beginning to understand that the exhaustion you carried for years was not caused by working too hard, but by taking on responsibilities that were never yours. You were carrying the unresolved emotional weight of your lineage. You felt the emotions your parents avoided. You released grief your partner could not express. That agreement, however, is coming to an end. Nature, in its inherent intelligence, determines that after 60, the energy once directed outward in service to others must now turn inward in service to the soul. At first, this shift feels unsettling. It can feel like an identity loss. Who are you if you are no longer the helper? Who are you if you are not solving everyone else's problems? This is the empty space. This is the quiet. And within this quiet, the healed empath receives the first major gift: discernment. Earlier in life, your empathy was overwhelming. It blurred boundaries. You could not distinguish where you ended and another person began. You allowed draining individuals into your life because you recognized their wounded inner child and believed you could rescue them. After 60, however, the empath develops a sharp clarity. You still feel deeply, that never disappears, but you no longer take everything inside. You can see someone struggling and understand with genuine compassion that you cannot carry them through it. You can observe pain without becoming consumed by it. This creates a strong presence. Others may tell you that you have changed. They may say you have become distant or rigid. That is not accurate. You have not become rigid, you have become stable. You have shifted from being fluid to being firm. The essence is the same, but boundaries are now defined. These boundaries are essential because the work meant for the final phase of life requires containment, not constant output. The universe effectively releases you from the role of emotional caretaker so you can step into the position of elder. Those who achieved early, who rushed through goals and built their identity on recognition, appearance, or status, often reach 60 and struggle. They look at themselves and feel diminished. Panic arises because their sense of worth was entirely dependent on external function rather than inner substance. But you have been preparing for this era your entire life. While others stayed focused on surface-level concerns, you were exploring inner landscapes, navigating periods of deep introspection and understanding the complexity of the human mind. The questions they are only beginning to ask now are ones you addressed decades ago. The balance is shifting. In the face of mortality and legacy, the most relevant abilities are empathy, advanced pattern recognition, intuition, spiritual endurance, and the capacity to remain present with uncertainty. Consider the idea of the golden shadow. The shadow is often understood only as darkness, repressed emotions such as anger, greed, or jealousy. And yes, you had to acknowledge and integrate those aspects to arrive here. However, the golden shadow holds something different. It contains your intelligence, your strength, and your authority, qualities you suppressed because you did not want to intimidate or overshadow others. You reduced your presence to make others comfortable. You minimized yourself so others could feel secure. After the age of 60, the barrier around the golden shadow begins to dissolve. The energy once spent restraining your own capacity is released. This explains why many empaths experience a late surge in creativity or leadership during this stage of life. This is not newly created energy. It is energy that has been recovered. You no longer feel the need to justify or apologize for your intuition. Think about how many times you sensed that something was off: a flawed business decision, an untrustworthy relationship, a risky direction, yet allowed logic or external pressure to override your inner awareness. You ignored your insight to preserve harmony. The healed empath, after 60, develops complete confidence in their internal guidance. You recognize that intuition was never speculation. It was information processed faster than conscious reasoning could manage. When you speak now, you do so without seeking approval. Your voice carries the authority of someone who has observed the underlying patterns of human behavior. This leads us to the mechanics of this transformation. Jung described life as having a morning and an afternoon. The morning of life centers on the ego, achievement, growth, and the construction of a social identity used to function in the world. For the empath, the morning was often difficult. The role you were expected to play never fully aligned with who you truly were. You sensed the disconnect between appearance and authenticity, and that tension created years of subtle but persistent unease. Now, firmly situated in the afternoon of life, that constructed identity begins to weaken. What might appear as collapse to others is understood by you as progress. This is individuation, the gradual removal of what does not belong to you. Relationships based on convenience rather than depth begin to fade. Responsibilities rooted in obligation instead of care lose their hold. You are experiencing a process of release. In alchemical terms, this is calcinatio, the burning away of what is unnecessary. It is uncomfortable. There is loss involved. You grieve the version of yourself you believed you had to maintain. Yet beneath what has fallen away, something enduring remains. What is emerging now is not fragile. It is the core strength that was always present. Buried beneath layers of people, pleasing and societal expectations, you are beginning to realize that what you once saw as weakness was actually unfinished strength. The sensitivity that made you tear up at commercials or physically feel a stranger's pain was never a flaw, it was raw, unprocessed data. Now at 60, you are learning to work with that data without letting it overwhelm you. You are becoming a conduit, not a container. You allow emotions to pass through you like wind through a screen, acknowledging them, understanding them, but holding on to none. This is the state of the wounded healer who has finally healed themselves, a rare frequency to inhabit. Most people never reach this level of self-awareness. They remain trapped in the cycles of ego until the very end. Finding others who speak this language, who understand the terrain of this inner world, is one of the late bloomer's greatest challenges. We are creating a sanctuary for those minds right here. If you see your reflection in this description, if you are ready to stop apologizing for your depth and begin embracing your power, take a moment to subscribe. It is more than a click. It is a quiet signal to your own mind that you are choosing truth over noise, that you have finally found your people. Once you step into this alignment, your relationship with time transforms. For decades, you felt like time was slipping away. The ticking clock, the pressure to keep up, it weighed on you. But the healed empath no longer views time linearly. You enter Kairos, God's time. You understand that the soul does not age in a straight line. Your 60 years were not a delay, they were a period of gestation. You were growing roots deep into the dark soil so that your branches could eventually reach the highest sky. The oak tree does not envy the grass's speed. You are built for longevity, not haste. This brings us to the most profound shift of all, the transformation of loneliness into solitude. For decades, you likely experienced deep loneliness. Even when surrounded by others, perhaps especially then, you felt isolated. This happened because you were vibrating at a frequency that nobody else could perceive. You were sending out a signal that went unnoticed. You confused being alone with being unlovable. To escape the echo of your own quiet, you filled the void with noise, with service, with concern for others. But after 60, something remarkable occurs. The silence stops feeling empty and begins to feel abundant. You stop fleeing from yourself and start moving toward yourself. You recognize that you are the person you have been seeking. The constant need for external validation fades away. You discover that a calm morning with a cup of coffee and your own thoughts is far more fulfilling than a loud party full of superficial chatter. This is not loneliness. This is sovereignty. The energy drainers, narcissists, and opportunists who once gravitated toward your exposed wounds suddenly retreat. They can no longer latch onto you because the cracks where they used to enter have healed. You become unshakable. Their drama, which once became yours, now merely bounces off your field. You observe their storms from the safety of your lighthouse, compassionate yet entirely detached. You are no longer a victim of your empathy, you are its master. This mastery brings a new role within the collective. You become a stabilizing presence. Joseph spoke of individuals whose mere presence reduces the chaos of a room. That is now you. When you enter a tense family gathering or a stressful meeting, you don't need to speak. Your nervous system is so regulated, so anchored in self, that it naturally serves as a tuning fork for those around you. People calm in your presence without knowing why. They seek your guidance not for advice, but for your presence. You have become a space holder, someone who creates a space where others can heal simply through your being. This is the reward. This is what the suffering prepared you for. The seemingly wasted years, the tears in the dark, the feeling of alienation, everything was training. You were being shaped into an instrument capable of carrying a resonance that would overwhelm a lesser spirit. You may have thought you were failing, but in truth, you were becoming capable. This leads to the final revelation. The ultimate gift of the empath after 60 is the power of synthesis. For much of your life, you may have felt fragmented. You had an intense interest in psychology, an unusual talent for gardening, a random fascination with history, and a remarkable ability to listen to strangers. To a logical, linear world, these pieces did not seem to fit together. You were criticized for being scattered, but Joseph would say otherwise. He would explain that you were not scattered, you were constellating. You were collecting the ingredients for a creation no one else has attempted. Early achievers specialize, they focus intensely on one narrow skill. But the late blooming empath integrates. When you reach this stage, it doesn't appear as a gradual progression. It looks like everything you've ever learned suddenly aligns in a geometric pattern. Every wasted hour, every painful detour, every hobby you abandoned, all of it snaps into place to form a unique competence. You see that the depression was necessary to grasp depth, the isolation was needed to develop vision, and the sensitivity was required to truly read the room. This is your magnum opus, your defining work. It is the full expression of your soul's blueprint. Because it draws from such diverse, authentic experiences, it cannot be duplicated. You become a category of one. In a world of mass production and artificial intelligence, the synthesized soul of the elder empath is the only thing irreplaceable. This is why you survived. This is why the pressures of your 30s did not break you. You were being preserved for this precise moment in history. Look around. The world is in a crisis of meaning. Old systems are collapsing. The logic of machines is failing. The world doesn't need more efficient workers. It needs healers who have endured the fire. It needs elders unafraid of darkness because they've lived there. You are like bamboo growing unseen underground for 5 years, only to shoot 80 feet in 6 weeks. The silence of those years wasn't emptiness, it was preparation. Now you are ready to emerge. Do not be misled by age. In the soul's economy, you are only beginning. The first act was rehearsal. The second act is the performance. Stop measuring your life by society's timeline. Tear it up, it was never yours. Your journey is vertical, not horizontal. You are not moving toward the end, you are moving toward the center. The curtain rises. The audience waits. And this time, you don't need a script because you finally know yourself. Here, we are gathering the scattered tribe of these rare souls. If something resonated today, if you felt your potential click open, do not let this moment slip away. Join us. Subscribe not just to watch, but to anchor yourself in this new reality. Let this be your signal to the universe that you are ready to begin the great work. Welcome to the afternoon of your life. From here, the view is infinite.